This video will show you how to use goblins in a way that is realistic for their skill set and will make them feel less like boring, generic, vanilla style monsters and more like the chaotic, stealthy little merchants that they are, which will in turn give you a better chance at running better games for your players. Goblins are classic Dungeons and Dragons nasties. They can be a lot of fun to DM if you know how to use them properly, which you will do if you watch this video the whole way through. I'm going to show you not only how to use goblins, but also the way in which a lot of DMs use goblins incorrectly or in ways that don't really suit their strengths. So make sure you stick with me for the whole video to ensure that you avoid those mistakes yourself. Now, traditionally, goblins are low-level enemies for low-level parties. If that doesn't quite suit your needs right now, that's fine, don't worry about it. We're going to be reviewing a lot more monsters as this channel goes on, so make sure that you hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss out on the chance to take your DMing to the next level. In fact, even better, let me know down in the comments below what monsters you are currently running with, and I'll be able to do a breakdown for them so that you can take your skills with them to the next level and really challenge your players and make it those memorable game sessions that the players talk about for weeks afterwards. So with that, let's dive into their stat block. The first thing that you'll notice is that their dexterity is relatively good. It's their main standout stat. Their AC is relatively high, especially for lower level parties. It's going to be fairly difficult for them to hit at 15. However, their hit points, with only 7 hit points per goblin, that's really low. That's like embarrassingly low. Couple that information with the fact that they also have a +6 to their stealth. When you consider that, you find that you have creatures that are ideally suited towards ranged combat rather than melee combat. A closer look at their stat block shows that they have a Nimble Escape feature, which is so important to how you play goblins. Nimble Escape allows you to either hide or disengage as a bonus action. Now, when you consider that goblins have a +6 to their stealth, it makes a lot of sense that where possible, they will use their bonus action, that Nimble Escape that they have, to hide as many times as possible. Ideally, at the end of their turn they will hide so that they can avoid anybody being able to attack them, and it also means that at the start of their next turn they gain advantage from that attack as they're attacking from a spot where their victim, their target, can't see them. So they gain that advantage, which gives them a higher chance to hit. You'll also notice that the goblins have dark vision, which when you pair that up with stealth means that these creatures would normally operate in the night time under the cover of darkness, so they have a better chance of remaining hidden from their victims. Fun fact, if you go back to this 1981 edition of Dungeons & Dragons rules, you'll find in there that the goblins actually have a -1 modifier to their attack bonus when they attack during the daytime, so historically goblins have always been nighttime attackers. I would recommend bearing that in mind when you're planning your sessions with goblins. So, how do you tie this all together? Well, before we get into the real business, I just want to take a second to ask you guys to drop a like on the video. Being such a small channel, every single like really helps, and I really appreciate it. But let's dive into how we actually use the goblins in a session. So first things first, I want you to look at who initiates the combat. Is it the players? Is it the player characters who find the goblins? Or is it the goblins who have been stalking the players and are initiating combat? The reason that matters is because each different scenario will be handled in completely different ways. Remember, goblins are ideally ambushers and trap setters. That's how they want to fight. They do not want to fight out in the open during the day, sword on sword. That's not really their style. You also have to remember that goblins have the Nimble Escape feature. You have to make sure that you use this feature whenever possible when you are playing as goblins. So, my recommendation, you'll open with an attack from range. Remember, as I mentioned earlier, you have advantage on the attack roll if your goblins are hidden, so if they've been able to set up this ambush properly, they will have advantage straight away from the off. Secondly, they will look to maintain distance between them and those that they are targeting. So they want to maintain roughly, I would say, around a 40 to 60 foot difference or space between them and their target. Reason being, most characters can only move 30 feet on their turn. So they want to stay out of that range so that characters can't attack them. Meanwhile, they can still attack the characters using short bows. After you've made your attack and you've maintained the distance between you and your target, I want you then to use your bonus action to hide somewhere. This is where your Nimble Escape is going to come in use. Remember, you have a +6 to your stealth bonus, so every time you try and hide, you're adding +6 to your roll. And I can't stress this enough, you always want to end your turn hidden as a goblin, because it sets you up for the next round, giving you advantage on your attack once again, where you'll rinse and repeat. Attack with advantage, move to maintain distance, hide. And that's how goblins work and operate in combat in ideal situations. Now remember, goblins are small creatures. Use that to your advantage, especially when you hide. Make sure you're hiding behind cover to give them that cover bonus, either half cover or 3/4 cover. Which one you go for, remember, this is all down to you. How wide the tree is, how big the rock is that they're hiding behind is completely down to you. So use your own DM initiative to decide whether if this is a very difficult combat for the players and the goblins are looking like they're going to overpower them, make sure that you only give them half cover rather than 3/4 cover to help the players out and balance the combat a little bit. That's your job as the DM, is to make this a challenging but not overpowering encounter for your players. Now remember when I said at the start, it matters whether it's the players that are initiating combat or the goblins that are initiating combat. What I want you to do if the goblins get engaged in melee combat is, if they outnumber the players, they'll stand and fight until they sense that they're losing, and then they'll flee at their first opportunity. If they're already outnumbered, they will not even try and engage in melee combat. They will just use Nimble Escape to disengage, and then they will use their action to dash away, ideally to their hideout, to where the rest of their clan is, where they will then bring more goblins out to fight the players. Goblins are highly disorganized. They come from a savage background, but they are not silly. They will understand when they are looking at death from combat, and they will not want that. They will either run, or if they don't have the opportunity to run, they will beg and grovel for their lives and then take their first opportunity that they can to escape. Next up, we want to look at who goblins might combine with in combat, just to mix things up a little bit. Your first option is the goblin boss. However, I really do not rate the goblin boss. And the reason for that is that a lot of their main abilities are focused on melee. They're able to move one of their adjacent allies into the path of damage so that they don't take damage themselves. I mean, as I've mentioned, goblins ideally fight at range, so that doesn't really help. It wouldn't make sense for them to try and utilise that to overpower the player characters. So, I would avoid goblin bosses personally. A better option might be bugbears. The reason I say bugbears is because they also have a +6 to stealth, so they can move with the goblins stealthily through cover. However, they are much more suited towards melee combat. Completely forget javelins. If you are playing as a bugbear, don't worry about the javelins. Use the Morningstar. The best way that I can think of to combine these two is use the goblins to draw the player characters in, have the bugbears hidden, and then as the player characters pass the bugbears, they jump out and engage in melee, meaning that the goblins can still engage the player characters from range, whilst the bugbears are up in their business, using melee, using their brute strength to keep the goblins protected and deal some real damage to the player characters. If you wanted to spice it up a little bit, you could put a goblin on the back of a warg. Completely up to you. This helps make it a little bit more difficult, and it makes melee combat a little bit more appealing for goblins if that's what you really want to set up, mainly because wargs have the ability to knock a player character prone, meaning that any goblin that attacks a prone character will also have advantage, so it really sets them up that way. However, like I said, that's completely up to you. If you want to put goblins in melee, that's how I would do it. I would team them up with wargs a little bit. And then one final option is hobgoblins. Now, hobgoblins are much more militarized infantry style units. The way they would use goblins is they would have themselves engaging in melee combat with players, whilst they would have goblins hidden off to the side or up on a high point, raining down arrows on their opponents where possible. With regards though to bugbears and hobgoblins and wargs and all of that sort of stuff, I'll be doing more battle reviews as we go on, so you'll get more detailed information on those different monsters as and when they crop up. Like I said, let me know in the comments if you have any preference over which monsters you'd like me to do next. Make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss those videos when they come out. All of this stuff is just to help you take your DM game to the next level, to really challenge your players. Finally, let's move on to giving the goblins a Battle Academy grade so we can get a good idea of where they're strong and where they're not so strong. So this grade is, for me, I've broken it down into 5 separate parts. The first part is their ability to deal damage. The second part is their ability to absorb damage. The third part is their skill set. The fourth is their versatility. And the fifth is their roleplay potential. These for me are 5 key areas for monsters when you're considering setting up combat encounters for your players. Now, for dealing damage, I've gone to give them a grade of 2 out of 10. They only deal 1d6 damage, however, they do have advantage regularly if you play them properly. So that's what moves their dealing damage grade from a 1 to a 2. Remember, if you're attacking with advantage, you're more likely to hit, and the more hits you get, the more crits you get, the more damage you deal. That's what takes their dealing damage grade to 2. When it comes to absorbing damage, they are just a 1 out of 10. Their HP is ridiculously bad. 7 hit points is nothing. Even for a level 1 character, if you can hit them, you're going to do a lot of damage to them straight away. In fact, the only thing that stops their absorbing damage number from being a 0 is the fact that they have a 15 for their armor class, which makes them somewhat difficult to hit for a low level character. Their skill set, this is where goblins stand out for me. Their skill set is actually really good. Stealth, Nimble Escape, their range, their dark vision, all of these things add up to provide a really nice skill set, and you can tell that goblins are creatures that have been very popular over the years and that have been worked on by the game designers as more editions of D&D have come out. For that reason, their skill set is getting a 3 out of 10 and is their highest score. Their versatility is down a 1 out of 10, primarily because for me, anything other than an ambush and ranged combat is bad news for goblins. They don't want to be up close encounter style fighting. That doesn't suit them at all. They want ranged combat and they want to ambush their opponents. For that, their versatility is a 1 out of 10. Now, their roleplay potential is a little bit more interesting. These are creatures that, as I said, they won't fight to the death. If they realise that they are likely to die, they will either try and run or they will surrender. They do speak common, so they are able to communicate with pretty much every single player character. And also when you look at their intelligence, their wisdom, their charisma, they're not incredible, but they're also only slightly below kind of the average levels. So they do have the ability to interact with creatures, even creatures that they would originally have wanted to fight against or even kill. If it's in their best interest, to try and survive, it means they have to do one of those types of encounters with people. They will engage in that sort of thing. So there is a small roleplay potential there, and that's why I've gone for a 2 out of 10. Overall, if we add up all of those scores, that gives them a total score of 9 out of 50, which on the grading scale that I've created sets them up with a grade F. So what do you guys think of my grading? Did you like it? Did you agree with it? Did you disagree with it? Let me know down in the comments what your thoughts were, whether you would have changed anything or done anything differently. If you did like this video and you found it helpful, then make sure that you hit that like button and you subscribe for more videos in the future. Any comments are also going to help me out with the YouTube algorithm and helping these types of videos get discovered. That's all for today though. Thank you very much for watching, guys. Be good.